Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Knights of the Roundtable Service Catalog Series webinar. My name is Tabitha Ishman, and I'm the Marketing Manager of Excalibur Data Systems. This mini-series has been everything that you needed to know about the Service Catalog. Session 1 was more focused on building the Service Catalog, and session 2 was based around the evolution of the service catalog. And today's session is going to be focused on the analytics of the service catalog and kind of a wrap up of the other two and a little screen share of other demographics involving the service catalog. So today we do have two of our customers, Nick from IU Health and Steve from Atlantic Health, and then one of our consultants, Mike Estep, that will be our presenters today. So I do just want to remind everyone that this is an interactive webinar, which will allow you to ask questions and share ideas with us. And please don't hesitate to drop questions in the chat window below. Follow-up recordings and emails will be sent on Monday, September 23rd. And we're really excited to have you all in our Cherwell community and to create an atmosphere of engagement with you. So Excalibur Data Systems is a boutique integrator specializing in ITEL-based ITSM platforms, and Excalibur has seen success in working with clients to identify enabling technology that has fit their business needs. So we're a really proud thought leader in the Cherwell community while offering a breadth of other services. So these services do include process design, implementation, automation, maturity assessment, strategy and road mapping, ongoing consulting, staff augmentation, training, integrations, self-service portal design, BRM solutions, analytics and dashboards, and customized solutions. We do have long-term strategic partners that we work with to achieve the best outcome according to your needs, budget, and timeline. And these partners are Cherwell, Bomgar, CG4 Asset Tracking, Comaround, Device42, Firescope, Celertis, Talent, and Fixstream. We do have two headquarters, one in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada, and the other in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And if you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to email info@excaliburdata.com. So I do want to introduce the moderator for the rest of the webinar. I'd like to introduce Robert Goguen, President of Excalibur Data Systems Canada.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again for joining and wrapping up the series around the service catalog and all the wonderfulness that goes with that. Today, we're excited to finalize this, talking primarily about a number of different ways that you can leverage the service catalog in addition to the discussions that we had prior to, talking a bit about analytics around your service catalog and determining how effective the service catalog is actually being. And we're going to have both, later on, we'll have both Steve and Nick talk about the service catalog and how they are doing their analytics and the conclusions that they're drawing with inside their own environment. So with us today is Michael Estep. Michael Estep has been working with Cherwell a very long time. Michael was actually one of the speakers at the very first Cherwell Global Conference and has been a speaker pretty much every year since, and has a tremendous amount of experience and background, former director in IT, and he's going to talk a little bit about his experience with how to leverage the service catalog and kind of extending how you use the catalog specifically within portals and in various areas like that. And so I will be happy to pass it over to Mike so he can go through and talk to you all about his experience.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where in the world that you might be at. It always depends. So today I've been asked to share one of our clients that had a kind of a service catalog dilemma, if you will. So most of the time when we build out a service catalog, we're always building it out for an IT, we're always building out for internal customers or even our external customers that might be across the Americas, might be across the world, etc., anywhere. However, there are some companies, especially within software. I've come from a software company before where I worked with previously, and they have not only internal IT customers with desktops and laptops and monitors and all that kind of thing, but they also have a production support, the ones that their own software is supporting. So how do we get two different service catalogs onto a portal? Well, one of the ways that we figure out how to do it was putting some toggles in some specific places. So if we take a look, and I've got some screenshots here of where I've done it at. So I put some toggles within the service, the category, the incident category, and the incident subcategory. This one is particular name. They have a department called CAPS. So we have an internal CAPS and two different portals. So we have a customer portal. Well, actually three different portals: customer portal, field rep portal, or sales rep portal. So for the sales folks that come in, and then also one for IT portal. Why all the different portals? Well, one is the customer, being that I'm a software vendor. So these are my customers from my software that I'm selling folks, and I want to get them support. The IT portal would be my internal one, again, the desktops, laptops, monitors, all that kind of thing. And then of course, sales reps that are selling my software. A nice place for them to come into a different type of portal from the customer that give additional information, or even to put a ticket in on behalf of one of my customers that might be frustrated or having issues, etc. So we built a service catalog, and we put at each level, so service and incident category, these different toggles to where we could say, okay, I want to show this subcategory in the customer portal, and then, or I might just want to not show this category or show a category, or the same with the service. And in order to show those things on any of the portals that we're doing, we set up our credentials in our security groups to then leverage that toggle. So as a support portal customer, we would come in and we would limit our records based upon the criteria that the service equals true. Same with the category, where we limit it based upon that category, limit it based upon the subcategory. So depending on which portal that I'm coming into and looking at the service catalog, I may have additional options or less options than some of the other folks, like a sales rep person, for instance. Because a sales rep, they might get to other service catalog categories that may be more internal, that a customer should not be putting a ticket in for. So they can put one in even on behalf of their customer as well. And since this customer is kind of a unique one with the software, there might be some software folks out there as well, we also have the internal one, and internal for CAPS and internal for IT, so that then I can also separate my service catalog that I'm looking at from the application side or the technician view side, to look at only the services categories or the subcategories that my IT folks might want to see, and they don't need to see my production support, service catalog, etc. Again, folks, 5, 10 different ways to do things within Cherwell. This is one of the ways that we found was a kind of easy way to do it. And that's what I have for my presentation today.
So, Mike, I have a question. This is Nick. Really quickly. So your client there, how did they? So they had a fundamental understanding of of who their customers are. So when they were fed into the system as a customer record, or they were associated with a particular security group over another. Can you just kind of describe that logic and how they made the distinction?
Ask the question again.
So you had different security groups for the customers that identified which portal or what portal items they saw. So how were those security groups defined? So how do I know if a customer should be in one versus another? Did they just they sort of operationally had an understanding of who those people were and what their role was?
So operationally, it's in the customer record itself. We have a couple of different customer tables, or customer children, if you will. So customer company, customer contact underneath customer company. Those would be my external, those would be the ones that would be for this portal. And then we also have the customer internal, which is one that's kind of out of the box. Those would be my sales rep, because customer internal could also, if I hit the sales rep portal, I'll get this one with our software. But as a sales rep, once my IT, as my IT folks are in there as well, I might want to hit the IT portal.
Mm-hmm.
So for the security group support portal sales rep, it's going to have both for this particular one, and we separated incident, by the way. So incident table out of the box is for IT, and for our production support, we made another business object called support incident, so that we absolutely keep those separate.
Mm-hmm.
But that way,
Okay.
if I'm a salesperson, I could hit the IT portal and still get the things I need to. But as a support portal, I could hit that one and get to the ones that I'm being pared down to here.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Does anyone else within the group have any questions for Michael?
There's none asked right now, but if anyone would like to ask a question.
Okay, well, thanks, Mike, for demonstrating that for the group, and it's pretty helpful. There are a number of customers that we have that have multiple portals, multiple use cases, and managing the service catalog across those different areas. You know, specifically when we get into managed service providers, where managed service providers may have multiple portals, and they may have a large master service catalog, and there's a way for you to, one technique that you could use on the customer profile itself to indicate whether or not they do or do not have access to a particular service. And then you can manage those things through your security groups. So thank you very much, Michael, for your time and demonstrating that. Next, I'd like to allow Steve to present his, our presenters, of course, Nick and Steve, who have been constant with us throughout this webinar series. Nick is, of course, an engineer with Indiana Health University. He's been working with Cherwell for quite some time. And actually, Steve and I believe both Steve and Nick are presenters at the CLEAR conference here in Nashville in a couple of weeks. And Steve is with Atlantic Health. He's been a system analyst for quite some time, leveraging Cherwell. And Steve, I'm going to pass the floor over to you to start talking about classification uses and your experience.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. I'm actually not presenting at this year's CLEAR. I did present.
Oh, sorry. You did present last year. My apologies.
2017 and 2018, yeah. So that was last year. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Just want to make sure that's all working. Okay, so wanted to just share with you some ways things that we put in place to help determine classification usage, as well as just helping us get those triggers on maybe it's time to retire a classification. So one thing that I'll show you is usage, overall usage first. So we'll just go to incident subcategory. And I have to apologize, we just refreshed from production, and I set this up in our test environment, and I completely forgot to make a backup of a dashboard that I wanted to present for this. So we'll just use table management, which everyone's familiar with. So here's some subcategories. We created some two fields, except I'll spell it correctly. And these fields get updated when the incident is closed. That is the final state of the incident, right? Not when it's resolved, but when it's closed. An automation process runs. It looks at the classification. It looks at the rec ID of the subcategory and says, okay, well, let me go update my subcategory record. And all it does is it just increments the count. And when was it last used? When was that count? And captures that date and time. Just a simple little count. You can see these are our heavy hitters. One thing that we're putting into place is, so this is like your odometer, letting you know how many miles have you done. But we want to do a trip counter, right, every quarter or every month, so we could see actual usage. So this one, as an example, was used, over 15,000 times, and the last time it was used was on the 20th today. Oh, look at that. However, but we don't know how often it was used, right, over the span of the years. Was it used 15,000 times just this year alone? Was it used, and maybe 15,000 isn't a great example. You start getting down to where it's just 75. Well, when was this used? All of these used? So how often were these used? So that's where our trip counter came in. We don't have that built out yet, but it's the same concept. It's just going to capture the count during a specific time range. And we're just going to start with quarters. So the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and we're going to keep a rolling 8 quarters. So everything will just shift back. We'll have a scheduled job that kind of shifts everything a month back, or shifts it over to the next count. This is great because now I can look at what has not been used ever. When was it created? That's important. Maybe it was just created. Maybe it was created years ago. I apologize for having to add these columns right now. Not empty. When we first went live, we weren't capturing the created date and time of subcategory or last modified. I don't know if out of the box, here's a little tip. If out of the box it's capturing that, great. If it's not, add it now. Add when these classifications are added and created and when they're last modified. So we could see this this classification was created back in January of 2017, and it was just recently used. That's great. But we could sort by, we could. Huh. Guess we can't. We're going to do is empty for that. So here's things that were created back in January, and they were never used. And as you can see, we have some that are retired. That's great, but we have some that are active. Now, I don't want to go in and just mark it as retired, even though I could. This now prompts me to have a conversation of, do we need to retire this? Do we need to get this out of our service catalog? Is it just something that was, maybe too granular and it's not being used anymore? Or maybe it's still needed, but it's not used frequently enough, or in this case, ever. We actually had one where it was never used. A year and a half went by. We just retired it. And about 2-3 weeks later, we got an email saying that they needed it back. They didn't know why it was gone. We never used it. So no problem. We just flipped it back to active. So that's why we had the conversation with those folks of whether or not we need to, if they need to be retired. Right? There's a whole bunch of them. So our criteria is if it hasn't been used in a year and a half. That's just what falls on our radar. We also have an application lookup table that does the same thing. It's our 4th tier, which I mentioned on our last session, but it's just another table that we just capture the usage. Also, we have an admin dashboard that we have all sorts of goodies on. And this is when we can look at when is it time to really get rid of a classification. And this one up here, the CI application is decommed, but we still have an application lookup record active, right? This is a classification, is letting us know that we have at least one classification active or an application record that was decommissioned. Oops, I shouldn't show you these. Here's our classifications for this app CI record, and they're all still active. Well, if this app is truly decommed, then these classifications should no longer exist. Again, we'll still have the conversation with the analyst of that application record, making sure, but it just gives us visibility into the system to keeping the system clean, right? Things are moving and not everyone's always informing us, and that's fine. They don't have to. We'll build it so we'll know. We also get a ticket in this case It's not just a dashboard, but we get a ticket whenever an application is decommissioned, whether or not there's a classification, we just get a ticket. We also get a ticket whenever an application record is created, so we can have the conversation with them on, do we need to add any classifications for you? We go back to that admin dashboard. Yes.
Question.
Yes.
So in those situations that you guys are analyzing whether or not, okay, a classification has not been used in a period of time, is it just an automatic process where you say, well, obviously we're not using, we're going to deprecate it? Or do you start to ask the question, why hasn't it been used? In that, is it because another classification is sort of that those tickets, there's another classification that's very similar to that classification where most of the tickets are being dumped into that? Or part of your analytics, are you looking at saying, are tickets being misclassified, or are our queues too general and not specific enough, where we have really general queues and we have very specific queues? Are the reasons they're not getting picked is because people are dumping this into a more general queue? And is that the types of things that you guys look at when you're analyzing it, or when you look back on it?
Absolutely. So if it's just a subcategory record that doesn't require an app, that one's a little hard to nail down, because with an app, we can find the app team that's responsible for it. We can have those discussions. When it's something with a computer, well, there's multiple teams that could be supporting that. We have multiple sites throughout our organization, so it's not just one team that we need to go to. So we have, regardless, we do have those conversations of, we do analyze before we have the conversation. We will take a look at, well, maybe, they're picking computer, but it's really desktop. Do we need both categories of computer versus desktop? Does anybody really care? Is it that important that we need that? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't know that answer, because that's how do we need to operate. If we're finding that everyone's picking computer over desktop, let's get rid of desktop because they're one and the same, right? Computer versus laptop. You could maybe draw an argument there as well. But maybe there's some sort of workflow that does drive on that. Well, laptops are different because there's a different support mechanism that's involved for when the workstation is actually a laptop. I'm just using that as an example, right? Or a printer. Is it a wireless printer versus something that's on or is it an individual printer versus a shared printer? So yes, the answer is yes. These are the types of questions we come on. We don't just say, can we get rid of it? We do look at, well, why? With the applications, we do go talk to the application analysts and say, well, do we need to get rid of this? Your application was retired. Maybe there was a new name. Maybe it got, maybe it's being replaced by another app that we already had in our portfolio. Maybe we need to merge some of these. So we don't, it's not just an automatic thing. We do want the conversations, and we do figure out some analysis. There is some redundancy out there, Rob. So the short answer is yes, that is part of our analysis. Why hasn't it been used?
How frequently do you do your reviews? Do you do them quarterly? Do you use them annually? Like, how frequent would you recommend that people go and do those reviews to sort of parse down and improve their service catalog?
There's three of us on our team, and we're going in monthly. We're looking at the monthly. When in the case of an application being decommissioned, we're looking at it right then and there. But as far as what hasn't been used in the past year and a half, we're just looking at it. We have weekly meetings. We look at it about once a month just to have the conversation just with our team alone. And sometimes we can make the decision through our analysis. We can get rid of it now. But that was a good question. Yeah, there is a schedule that we have our internal review first, and then do we need to reach out to any other teams within our organizations if we need help making a decision.
Now, when you had brought up your counts seem to be very heavily focused on certain groups of classifications and certain services. Do you find that you get enough analytics out of the general group that most of these tickets get placed in? Or is that something you're also constantly evaluating and saying, are we getting the output of the analytics we're looking for, but it's clear that the vast majority of your tickets are being placed into this one sort of central group or bucket of tickets, like thousands here, but only hundreds down here?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, we do find that there is favorites, if you will, of just a dumping ground. of, computer report an issue, right, is one of ours. The subcategories report an issue, the category is computer. And things will be sometimes classified as report an issue, but it's not really an issue. They're just saying, I would like someone else to be able to log into my machine as well. Is it an issue? Well, not from an IT perspective. This isn't something that's wrong. They're just requesting, to me, it's an access request. But maybe it's an issue for them because that person can't log into their machine. So then it also comes out to were they ever able to log into their machine? And that's why we do it on closure, not what's live right now. On closure, that's the final state of the ticket, of the incident, the incident/service request. Our IT department will reclassify if there's a better classification to identify that ticket. So how it comes in from our tier 1, if it gets escalated, if there's a better classification that truly identifies that after more diagnosis is performed, then that's fine. Then the classification will be updated. And when that ticket's closed, that's actually truly what identifies what was that classification. And I think I know where you're going to go. You might go with this next question. If you have another question, if you don't, I want to just insert something that we are going to do as well is, well, what classifications were picked originally, but then they went to this new classification? We haven't figured out how to tackle that there yet, other than querying journals. There is this awesome app that you guys put out there, the map that you guys put out there, that the team tracking map on the exchange.
Yeah, the team assignment is status tracking. Yeah.
Right, and I think it has some classification, like you could do the same concept, it's just at a field level. So we're thinking of making use of that for our classifications of, well, here's classifications that were picked historically, but it wasn't the final state of the classification that was used. So at least we have that information to look at. There's no need for it now, but I see that that's going to happen later. I'd also like to say that when we first went live with Cherwell about 6 years ago, when we moved from our other system, we're trying to figure out what we were doing. Our other system had 3 tiers. Anyway, we had about 6,000 or 7,000 different classifications when we first went live, and because of this usage and for the usage, was it ever used, and these things that we put into place, we're now down to just over 2,000. Seems like a lot, but 2,000 from 6,000 down to 2,000. Tremendous, much smaller record set that we're dealing with. We also have almost 900 applications now in our portfolio, and everything is not just a report an issue. If you think about it, there's different classifications for the app record. There's report, someone's having an issue with it, someone needs access to it, maybe they need help with a report. So there could be 11, anywhere from 7 to 11 or 12 different classifications per app, assuming that it's going to be available for our customers. Just the normal generic type of classifications. And there's some apps that have their own kind of specific subcategories. So while our service catalog seems bloated, well, 900 of those are because applications alone. And this gave us that visibility into that, and it allowed us to wrangle it and get it to a smaller list, and we just keep whittling away. Did I answer your question, or did I?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And so you leverage a lot of cause codes for your analytics on your incidents to allow you to further kind of parse down that classification when you're going through your resolution process.
The cause codes come into play. There's some specifics where we put some additional detailed cause codes where while it's not a lookup, some people put in their own error code, or their, if that's app specific, that they can report on that. It all comes into play. They're all ingredients in the soup.
Perfect.
I'm going to show if I still have time, I can share a little bit more.
Certainly.
Okay. So, by the way, this dashboard is just an admin dashboard in classic Cherwell orange, and this is kind of the one I'm honing in on. We also see on here, the application is not linked. It's not linked to an application lookup record. So out of our application portfolio in the CMDB, there's 153 of those that are not tied to a classification. It's not that it's wrong. We just want visibility into seeing which ones don't have classifications. I forget what this stat we gave you, but that's something old. We can get rid of it. Something else that we use a lot is we have an active subcategory that says it needs that fourth tier of the app lookup, but there is no app lookup record. So we have this orphaned record out there, and I'll give you the quick visualization for anyone who wasn't on the session 2 of the service catalog. We added a fourth tier for our applications, but it's dynamic. That fourth tier doesn't always show up. It's driven by a setting within the subcategory, which is that third tier. So we'll do CSI. So service category, subcategory, this request enhancement subcategory. We're just going to go and take a look at that subcategory record. Down here, I have this checkbox that says, okay, we'll show the application lookup. It's more than just show, it's also require. So we're going to show this dropdown, and now we're going to require it. That's all this health check does right here is it says, show me any subcategory that has that checked off, but there are no app records for that subcategory. Maybe we retired all the applications for that. So here's this app, this CI app is decom, but there's app lookup records that are active. Maybe once we retire all those app records, the application lookup records, now there's no subcategories pointing to any other applications. Like that was it. That was the end of the line. This will let us know that. I had 2 of them because there was 2 different searches I was testing out.
So that basically admin panel allows you to groom your service catalog as the service catalog is shifting, because you don't always have control over the assets inside your CMDB and the different apps, because there are different teams that are responsible for those. But this allows you to keep those things in check from an administration perspective to ensure that your service catalog is sort of as clean as possible.
Precisely. Yep. And we do the same level while it's not on this dashboard, because it doesn't happen that often, and that's more of just a yearly or every couple of months I look at it. We do the same thing for categories where there's no more subcategories. And we do the same thing where the services, there's no more categories, right? Because everything works its way back. If the app should get retired, well, what subcategories were pointing to that? Okay, we don't need the subcategories, or we're fine. We get rid of the subcategories. Well, maybe that category doesn't have any more, there's no subcategories that are now, if those are all gone, the app lookup records, and then the subcategories might not be pointing anything. So we're just working our way back to service, yes, to pare it down, to keep it clean so we don't have these orphaned records out there.
Because orphaned records would cause an awful lot of problems for you, especially when people are trying to log tickets, because you have them set to require for save, and there's nothing there to do that. It creates a problem when creating the ticket.
Yes. Yep. Plus, I just like trying to keep things clean. We have a pretty flexible system where we can keep it clean and get a good eye on how things are working. So that's one of the things that I love about this dashboard. Yes, it's not beautiful to the eye, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to give us a visual into just a quick view into whatever it may be that we're looking for. Sometimes we build something and we'll put some stuff on this dashboard just to kind of run some health checks. We built our own custom shopping cart, and we found some cases when we got tickets of people, of some of our customers saying they're having a problem with one of their carts or whatever it was. We found out that there were shopping carts that had a status of in process, even though they should have been automatically closed. Right? I don't want to get into all the details of it, but it just gives us visibility into, okay, well, I think I put the fix in, but I want to put it on here so I can catch it if it happens again. Right? We have resolved tickets that are not auto closing. That was a problem for us a little bit. We put some customizations in where we had tickets that were resolved. 3 days later, they weren't being marked as closed. We put it on here so we can catch those. We fixed the issues, but I still have it on here, so if it does happen again, I see it and I fix it. Hasn't happened in months. I haven't touched that process in months.
I think this is a great concept for any administrator that's out there to start to put those checks and balances in on a dashboard like this, because more often than not, administrators only get notification that a ticket isn't closing when it's in a results state by someone reporting it, or it goes missed, or it's in an aging report.
Right. And there's a lot of this stuff. This is kind of a fluid dashboard. This little section down here, we'll kind of throw some things in ad hoc whenever we build something. And I don't really want to go too deep into this whole dashboard, but yeah, it gives us visibility. It gives us, the administrators, visibility into how is the system working. We built some stuff. Just because you don't get a ticket doesn't mean it's not working, and someone may not be complaining about it, but it may impact your reports or your searches later. So if people are doing searches on things that were, closed, well, their numbers could be off if things aren't actually closing. We're not getting those survey results. Why? Oh, well, there's about 400 tickets that didn't automatically close because of this one issue. Let's fix that issue.
Excellent.
So that, I just wanted to just share that. I could probably keep going on for hours, but is there any questions or anything from anyone else? Not that I don't want to hear from you, Rob, but is there any?
At this time, there's no questions in the box.
Doesn't appear anybody is asking any questions. So thank you very much, Steve, for demonstrating that. I think that you've given people some great ideas too, not just around the service catalog, but overall system management with your dashboard, being able to report on things when things aren't going well. And of course, in your particular setup, as we went into in great detail in the last session, being able to help you manage and groom that service catalog as things dynamically change inside your environment, and having a way to report on that so that you're catching things before they become a problem. And thanks for sharing that with everybody. I appreciate it. So now I'd like to turn it over to Nick. Nick is going to talk a little bit about some of their analytics and steps that they go through when it comes to doing their analytics in their environment to determine how effective their service catalog is, and speak a little bit to that effect. So go ahead, Nick.
All right, thanks everybody. I'm really excited. I really want to jump on. I was waiting my turn patiently, just really enjoying what Steve was presenting, and want to jump in and kind of piggyback off of that. The maturity of Steve's analytics is not a place where we are. I think if we were to go back 6 years in Steve's world, that might be where we are. So we are, I think we've talked in the previous episodes of the series how we are undertaking a process in our environment to reevaluate our service catalog. We currently have about 1,900 items in our classification, and we feel like a lot of that's not doing us much favor. And we're trying to figure out how to evaluate that. So just earlier today, right before I got into this meeting, I ran essentially a SQL query against my service catalog and tried to determine of my catalog how many have tickets in the system. And we have about almost a year's worth of data in this database. So we're looking at almost a year's worth of counts. And what I ended up finding here in this this query for my service catalog was that I've got 1,891 classifications, unique classifications, and 601 of those actually have less than 10 records associated with it, and that's like 31% of our service catalog. So I've been just now starting to really understand and analyze why do we have these listings that nobody's using in a year, and so now we're just now starting to take a look at those. So we have another query, we might say, show me everything with 1 or less. I've got 249 or 13% of my classification listings that don't have any tickets associated with them. So I just wanted to share that, and we're just now starting to look at this and analyze our service catalog. We have designs on implementing a new scheme to kind of collapse down some of this stuff and get rid of some of this. And this type of analytic reporting is going to be really useful as we begin to figure out, well, what does our new catalog need to look like? Where are our customers going to find value? So according to this, they find value in what is essentially 3 classifications. So password resets, desktop hardware issues, and general request. And then there's a big decline after that. But this sort of middle section of volume is where we spend most of our time beyond those initial 3. So this has been eye-opening for me within the last basically 2 hours after lunch when I did this, and it's sort of the first steps in our catalog analysis in our environment, and we're looking to utilize this intelligence to move forward with our project to reclassify things, reconstitute our service catalog. So SQL query, I don't have dashboards on it yet, but SQL query is the start of it.
I think it's important that people realize that, as you said, you have how many classifications, unique classifications, and to think that a large portion of the size of your service catalog, all the effort that went into feeling as if we need these classifications and you're not using them. And I think that that's an eye-opener for everybody, really, and a challenge, too, for all those that are on the webinar. Go back and run some searches, in the system. Take a look, put a dashboard together that will give you your ticket counts as it relates to, your classifications and tickets maybe over the course of the last year or what have you, and see what those ticket counts actually are. Because a lot of people take a lot of time and put it into their service classifications and their service catalog, and only to find out that a small percentage of your service catalog is actually being used. Is quite eye-opening in terms of where people are actually logging tickets or where they're putting those classifications.
One of the strategies that we're going to employ to try to cut down on classifications as we move forward is in a similar vein to what Steve has set up, but giving the customer a little bit more flexibility in navigating a smaller catalog, but providing application specificity. So I'll demonstrate this really quickly, and I think we talked about it in previous sessions, and I wanted to show this. And this will be impactful as we move forward in analysis in just changing the level of analysis that we do a bit. So if I say that I want to request software application support, I might say, well, in our healthcare space, I might create a couple of classifications. I'm interested in the difference between clinical apps and non-clinical apps. So if I select clinical apps, and maybe I want to report an issue. So I just have a few options here, and I want to report an issue with a clinical app that I use. And I'll be presented with essentially a short list of clinical apps that are active in our environment. And maybe I select one and have that submitted in. Ultimately, the selection of that CI translates to our incident forms in the device or system space, and that drives Cherwell a team assignment as well as specific forms that may be presented. So that is something that we're looking to implement, but the analysis at this point, if we look at our catalog in that environment, would be, well, I'm interested in clinical application issues, incidents maybe, but I might analyze that going forward by the identification of the specified device or system. But so these are things that I wanted to share, but I wanted to also talk a little bit about how we're setting that up and talk about some of the other things that we've set up to extend the utilization of our service catalog, some additional tips and tricks beyond analysis and setup. In that space where we set up the software and application support in our service category and subcategory, we're essentially defining this classification to use a system-based routing, which really restricts that prompt and the selection of a CI that doesn't exist anywhere else except for this particular listing. And we've just now introduced the concept of status, active or retired, for these listings in our subcategory. Even since the last time we talked at our previous session, we're taking the messages that and the lessons that we're learning to heart from folks like Steve and Rob, and we're putting that in place. We see the need for it, and it's not there, so we're trying to put that stuff in. The thing that I wanted to also point out here in our classification, our subcategory setup, is something that we use to add some additional functionality within our service catalog, both for our technicians and for our customers. So we identify in our subcategory currently the identification of a specific knowledge article associated with this request. So because our service catalog is so vast and so very granular, we've had the opportunity in the past set up to include very specific knowledge articles with each individual listing. So this article tells you how to deal with this particular thing. And by specifying that here in essentially a one-to-one relationship, we're able to present that to technicians in many cases. So if I say I'm a technician and I'm creating a ticket for let's say, let me create a new one here. Really quickly, just create a ticket. And I'm going to classify that with a Cherwell thing. And let's say, not every routing has a knowledge article ID associated with it, but some do. So if I were to pick this one for routing requests, it gives the technician some information they might need to know around this particular knowledge article, and we expose it in a tab for the technician. So this might be a real quick heads up reference for the technician, the person working the intake, or the person that's receiving this ticket, to say, this is the information you need to know. Ultimately, if we move to a more generalized classification, this would essentially become a filtered list from our knowledge article, where we're associating knowledge articles by service category or subcategory, or potentially type, incident type, and just giving a list of likely options in a filtered scenario, in a one-to-many scenario, rather than a one-to-one scenario as we do here. The other place that we use this, and this is something that's new as of the last month or so, is we decided that we wanted to try to use that relationship for our access requests. So one of the things that we did here was, let's say you want access to Cherwell and you want to become a licensed Cherwell user. So you're going to select this particular listing and submit that into us. And we've associated a knowledge article with this particular subcategory that essentially is the answer to the question of, so I've been granted access, now what, right? So we might go and sit down with somebody and say, well, okay, here are the things that you need to know about your newfound Cherwell user license. Here's some training materials. Here's how you download the application. Here's how you access it. So what we've done is actually configured into the resolution of this particular type of access request an automatic inclusion of the reference to the knowledge article on the customer portal. So if I'm a customer and my request for Cherwell Service Management access is resolved, where that's been added for me, then it says, I get this notice right away, and it says your access request has been fulfilled, and then please review this knowledge article for more information. So hopefully that cuts down on this material might be the same document that we might send somebody manually, saying, hey, welcome to the Cherwell family, or it may be just something that we might follow up with as part of the resolution, but it might have been manual in a previous sense, and we're just saying, once you have access to this, this is the information you need to know. And so it's automatically sort of conditionally included in the text. It's basically a text expression within the resolution notification that includes that article if it appears here for a particular type of request. So I wanted to share some of that as we talk about extension of the service catalog and utilizing it in different ways, analyzing, potentially seeing, we might look to see once this is implemented further, if that cuts down on follow-up requests. So we have an initial access request, then we might look at that customer to see if they're requesting any additional support with Cherwell that might otherwise have been addressed by the information that we've provided them automatically, to the extent that they might read it. But that was one of the things that I wanted to show. So a couple of ways that we use associated knowledge articles. We hope to be beneficial for our customers as they are referencing these access, but also sort of easy, sort of automated steps from a technician who might be manually sending that information anyways. So we can just go ahead and send it out for them. I'll be happy to stop here and answer any questions that anybody might have, or entertain any further discussion.
Does anyone in the group have any questions for Nick on what he's presented so far, or any questions overall? Okay, there doesn't seem to be any questions. So yeah, well, I first want to thank Mike, I want to thank Nick, and I want to thank Steve for attending today. Oh, we do have a question.
Great.
Oh, Jim said no. He doesn't have any questions. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate that. You got me all excited there for a minute. Yeah, so I do want to thank everybody for attending. We really appreciate it. Thanks for helping us roll out the series. I do want to remind everybody who's attending the Cherwell Global Conference the CLEAR Conference down in Nashville, that Excalibur is having an event while we're down there at the conference. And if you haven't received your invite, please let us know. We're more than happy to send you the link so that you can register yourself for the event at the conference. And it's going to be a fantastic time. And yes, I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank Nick, Steve, and of course Mike for attending. And yeah, I hope everybody has a fantastic day and weekend, and appreciate everyone coming and helping us wrapping up this three-part series.
Thanks, Rob. And this is Nick. And can I plug my speaker presentation at the CLEAR Conference?
Definitely.
All right. So, I am speaking at the conference here coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about service catalog, and I'm going to be going in and talking a lot of the stuff we've talked about here. So, but hopefully approaching in some different things, doing some deep dives. I believe the session is Tuesday at 11 during the conference. So, look forward to seeing folks there.
Does Mike want to plug himself too?
Was that at me?
Yes.
Yep, I'm speaking at the conference again this year. My topic is going to be on one-steps. It's really for those folks that have either begun or intermediate kind of stuff. We're going to be looking at one-steps from 4 different angles of where we can run them, etc. But we're also going to be looking at them as far as like considerations, where you might want to, things to think about when you're coming up with the brilliant one-steps that I've seen in the past, etc. So yeah, absolutely. I think I am on the first day, first session, and I can't remember what time frame that is, but I think about half my class is full. So if you haven't signed up, you might want to get signed up now.
Perfect.
Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you letting us participate in this discussion. I hope it's been valuable.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Nick and Mike, good luck at the during your sessions. I think I registered for one or both of them, but good luck.
Great.
Good luck down there.
We'll see you there.
Yep, see you there.
All right, I'm going to end the webinar now. Thank you everyone for attending.